Okay, I got a little bit of time before I got to do some things tonight, and I just noticed on this new pad that Sean gave me that it has Jack Crafty on the bottom. That's pretty cool. Alrighty, so this is just layered leather. I got a question on what this is. It looks like veg tan leather, just layered. 1, 2, 3, 4 layers, which means that that's pretty thick pieces of leather. As usual, I don't have my tape measure readily accessible, or I'd give you how fat that is. But anyway, the important thing is it's domed. Alright, so I'm going to notch on the domed pad for this only notching knapping video. This is just a little biface. I prepare these sometimes in advance, but usually not. But if I do, I try to get them as thin as I can. Anyway, what I'm going to do is explain deep notching on this as I go along. I've done it before in videos, but it seems like you guys can't get enough of this, so I'll do this one here. Now, I think I'll do the basal notching, since that is the most difficult, I think. Sometimes the side notches are difficult because you snap them across the neck, right? Snap the points across the neck, but for me, that's not as difficult as the base notching. And I'm going to be using this vertical little notching tool as well to see if I can expand the notches. So I'm going to do this. Try to do this without breaking off the initiation points, I guess you would call them. All right. Now it's safer to do this with a wider point. The wider, the better. When you do the base notching, that way the chances of ruining the stem are less. The stem and barbs are not going to be as easily ruined. The wider it is. The initiations are always going to be a difficult thing, but a lot of artifacts have wide initiations, like this one, more than an 1/8 inch wide. And that's, plenty of, it makes, it leaves plenty of room for the barbs, right? And it makes for a nice looking point, even if the initiations are wide. But people want to see how to do the narrower notching, just because it requires more skill, and ultimately, I think, people can sell their points for more money if they do a better job at the notching. Or, I shouldn't say better job, but more difficult type of notching. Alright, so this is less than an 1/8 inch so far. I can't remember if I typically trim the edges a little bit first or not, or I'd trim them later. I don't know, but the whole deal is, the thinner it is, the easier it is to notch. That's the whole deal. Second, I try to square off the bottom of the notches so it's not round, so it's squared off, so that you can push in the middle and press off a flake without worrying about sending in cracks and stuff to the sides. It's just a free flake, so to speak, if you hit it, if you snap it off straight from the middle when you have a flattened bottom of that notch. You want those pop outs to be nice and clean without interfering with the sides in any way. So yeah, just prepare it ahead of time a little bit by dulling it slightly so that you don't get too much crushing. Try to push out a nice pop out. I haven't done any napping since the last video. Oh, I did some just now. Let's see. I'm lying already. Now, I napped something just before this. I broke it in half. It was a piece of raw shirt, just to get back into the swing of things. And just remind myself how delicate this rock can be. I don't know if this is raw or not. I think it is not. And I made this pressure flaker more narrow just before the video. So that's a nice pop out right there. Now if I can remember, while I'm napping, I try to do those pop outs before I start notching. Again, I didn't remember on this one. Once I get into the napping, it kind of is just subconscious, right? I haven't developed the habit of sending in these pre-flakes or these pre-notching flakes. That's something I got to get into the habit of doing so that I don't have to think about it. I still have to think about that particular operation. And I often forget. But this is thin enough that it doesn't matter too much. But I'm gonna notch this also, this thicker piece. So I'm gonna put this to the side. It's the same type of material. I'm gonna put this to the side for now, and then start initiating these notches now that I remember that I'm supposed to thin out the notch path beforehand. Okay. I think I was supposed to do it on that other one too. I had this pre-planned already. But as I get started talking and napping, I forget. Alright. Let me just thin out or get rid of that step fracture there. I did a couple of natural tool videos over on my Allergic Hobbit channel, so if you want to check those out. What inspired me to do those was a request for a classroom instruction on spalling and also a quick demonstration of a basic point. No narration, so no one has to talk over me if they want to use that for instructional purposes. Okay. See if I can get rid of that step fracture. I don't really need to get rid of it for the notching, but I just want to because it kind of bugs me. Alright, so I'm going to do side notches here. So let's see if I can actually do what I say I can do as far as pre-notch preparation. I do it sometimes. Okay, so that's coming along all right. A little bit thinner would be nice, but I'm going to try to do it with a thick piece. And have both a thick piece and a thin piece in this video. but I don't want it too thick. Yeah, that's fine. It's too thick for the average atlatl dart foreshaft, but that's good. That's what I wanted. All right, so let's see if I can get those areas for the notches thinned down. Without messing this up. Sometimes you can overshoot by doing the notch preparation too aggressively. All right, let's see. And this is an aluminum flaker, by the way. Some people have gotten confused and think it's steel, but I use both steel and aluminum when I'm doing some modern tool videos, in addition to copper. I have some copper tools that I'm making, and I've used them in the past. I've used copper tools in the past. Just don't have much at the moment. I can't tell if this is raw or lightly heat treated. It feels kind of raw, but high quality raw also feels like lightly heated, so sometimes I can't tell the difference. Well, I say sometimes, probably most of the time I can't tell the difference between high quality raw and lightly heat treated stuff. And this is an old piece, so I didn't mark it. I started marking my pieces only recently, so I figure it really doesn't matter too much as long as it naps. It only matters if I do it on video so that people have a reference point. Is he using raw or heat treat or what? This might be raw, but I don't know. It's kind of steppy like raw, but we'll see. We'll see how steppy it is. I'm thinning down the blade too a little bit. I don't know why. Maybe so I can get more of a feel for the stone. I don't know. Just kind of bugged me to have it fat up here. Okay, so that's good enough for now. I think I've got the notch preparation pretty well done. Maybe a little bit more. Okay, let's see. It's okay if the notcher is a little jaggedy, but not too much. Sometimes you want it to slide just a little bit. You don't want it to be doing this thing, you know, stepping down. Sometimes you want it to glide a little bit through on the follow through. Let's see. Let me take time to shape this, so I can do another thinning flake. on both sides. I'm going to do this before I even start the notch, right? You can do it after you start the notch too if you have a flaker that's narrow enough. But the one I'm using is not all that narrow to start the notch first, so I probably need to make one. I used to have one, an indirect percussion notcher, or a punch notcher, horizontal punch notcher. A lot of guys have vertical punch notchers. I don't have any right now. I can make one pretty easily. Another supporter of the channel sent me a bunch of copper nails. The guy that, oh, sorry, I already forgot, but my subscriber that sent me this hammer and stuff sent me some copper nails too, so I can make a copper notcher in like 10 minutes or less. Alright, so let's see, what was I gonna do? Okay, thinning flake, hopefully. Yeah, nice. And one on the other side. Not too good. Better. Okay, so that's what I mean by preparation for the notching. See those flakes beforehand. You can see how it's thinned out. The stem area. And now we can just happily go ahead and do the perfect notches without making any mistakes. Alright, let's see. And start crunching away. Of course, the wider you are, the easier it is. How do you do this with natural materials? With lots of practice. Lots and lots of practice and lots of annoying. No, I don't have time for anything else. I'm doing notching, sorry. You're doing what? I'm working on a piece of furniture. Yeah. Oh, okay. No one knows what it is when you're doing notching, except when it comes to doing furniture. What do you notch when you do furniture? Well, when you're making jointed corners and stuff. Okay, let's see. I'm just crunching this in, not really doing anything complicated. I'm kind of abusing the bottom of this notch. A lot of times that happens when it's raw, right? It's kind of steppy. So this is more on the raw side than the heat treated side. All right, let's try to do one more pop out without doing the steppy thing. It's okay. So yeah, it's pretty effective when you do the preliminary work. Let's see. I might bring out my natural material tool. I'm changing my vocabulary both to mock this system and just to be a little more courteous. Yeah, I know I'm not supposed to cave. Alright, so this notcher, see how it wears down, but I'm just going to use it that way anyway. I would like it to be, flatter. Why? Because it puts more force on the corner when you're using the corner if it's more pointy. When it's really, really rounded, it doesn't apply as much force. I'll square it off a little bit more. And yeah, I'm cheating. I'm using the modern abrader, but I don't want to take forever. I'm just hitting it across. Alright, that's better. Even though it's still kind of rounded, it's a little bit better. Alright, so that's how I prepare the notcher. This is raw stone for you guys who love working the raw stone. As far as I can tell, it still could be slightly heat treated, but for the most part it does feel raw. I think what I did, I thought I was too high when I started, but it turns out I'm probably a little bit too low now. See, what I did was I took off the bottom of that just so I can fit this in there. I went lower, but I may have messed up the symmetry. Let's see, I need to make it a little more skinny or more narrow. On some of the artifacts, you can see how narrow their notchers were just by the imprint of the tool that they had. Some of them are pretty narrow, but they're not more narrow than this. This is about a 1/16 or so, maybe a little bit more. What did I do with my stuff? I moved my stuff around yesterday. Okay, so it's 3/32, right? And instead of a 1/16, it's a little bit more than a 1/16. Yeah, whatever that is. And millimeters, it's like from 3. Let's see, 2.5 millimeter. Okay. Same deal. Try to square off the bottom as best you can, and then push off in the middle using a domed pad, and just hope for the best. Not too shabby. Crunch it in a little bit so you can set up for the other side. Crunch it in to make it stronger so you can grip it, push real hard. Nice little pop out. You can kind of see the edges of that pop out. It goes around, let's see. There's a little trace of the edge of that pop out right there. That's what you want. In a perfect world, you get that every time, but of course, the world is not perfect. You know, and you get those same things with a indirect punch as well. Okay. I don't know if there's a special name for that type of flake. See, I don't have much room here. As it gets dicey when I'm that tight. Your tool's supposed to be like I don't know, I would say 75% of the width of the notch or less. Once you start getting more than 75%, I'm guessing, right? But it starts getting dicey. Yeah, even if it's a shallow notch, it's still okay. Still good. I mean, shallow flake. As long as you get a flake. So I touched this part right there with the side of this notcher, so it took off a little bit of the barb. Alright, so I'm going to stop with this notcher, because I know I'm going to blow away something here, and switch over to the vertical. And then in future videos, I'm going to make a vertical natural tool notcher. Where'd it go? I have a vertical tool notcher here somewhere made of steel. Here it is. Let's see, I'm going to continue with this. Now, I haven't been practicing with this at all, so let's see how this goes. I think I did one about a month ago with this notcher. If this goes deeper than, let's say, a 1/4 inch, I'm going to blow away the side, so I got to make sure I don't mess that up and go too deep with this. That was very dicey. I'm probably going to have to make this more narrow, because right now it's tapered to the tip. I'm probably going to have to make it straight, because I felt that I was touching the sides. I was touching the sides of that notch, and luckily the material's strong enough to hold up to it, because I went all the way to there, and the point actually stopped me. And that's not supposed to happen. You're not supposed to rely on the rock to stop you. So yeah, I'm going to have to modify this. Even with a domed pad, and even when it's pretty solid leather, the amount of force you need to do these notches still causes a bounce back on the point and a deep indentation in the pad. So the combination of those two things will blow off an ear or a barb. So I'm going to modify that tool for notching later. Okay. Part 3 or something. Yeah. So you've already seen me do this tool on this side, so I'm just going to put this down and continue with the other one with a more narrow notcher. And I'm approaching the end of this segment, so I'll continue on the next segment. Okay, so I'm going to crunch these in. I'm going to go vertically, maybe a little bit inward. See how narrow I can manage these. I can't go more narrow than the tool itself, obviously. So just to save yourself some headache, it's good to judge, or try to judge how far you can go in. I'm not going to be able to go very far, it looks like. That's a little bit unfortunate. I sanded this down before the video I was hoping they would be able to notch further than this. See, I'm okay here, but once I start going further in, this is tapered again. I'm going to have to do a different grind on this for the long, narrow option. I already know all this stuff. I just didn't think far enough ahead for this particular video. But yeah, we need to plan ahead. Don't do like I just did and quickly gather the materials and quickly put a grind on your tools. These narrow, long notches require preparation. How do they do this with natural materials? Well, they didn't do too much of this. And when they did, they probably end up crying a lot because they would break a lot of their stuff. And a lot of times one notch is fatter than or wider than the other. You get asymmetrical notches on the real ones. Because it goes good on one side, but then they ruin the other side. Yeah, I'm already too deep to use this flaker because this is tapered as well. With a vertical puncher, I'm going to have a real narrow one, right? This is too thick, I think, for an extremely narrow vertical puncher. Okay? I say puncher. Notcher. It's going to be too narrow for, too thick for this kind of narrowness on the flaker for the notching. I can do a little bit more. Nice little pop out flake. See, I just did that with this notcher, but that's about as deep as I can go. Without risking blowing away the sides. Okay, so if I want to go further in now, I've got to widen it out. I'm trying to think of a mathematical formula for, 3 to 1. 3 to 1 is pretty good. If you got 3 to 1 on, width to length, you're doing pretty good. Of course, in the archaeological record, there's a lot better than that. Like, you can have a crazy ratio there. But if you got 3 to 1, you're doing okay. Any better than that, and you're getting into the advanced stages of knapping. Okay, so what should I do here? Widen these out. Widen out and continue. Got to be careful when you're widening too. that's passive pressure. Press until it releases. That's the most stable and predictable way to make a flake, and so you're not hitting the sides. Right? If you're just doing aggressive pressure, you'll hit the sides more often. And that's very important with the natural materials because they're usually thicker than steel and copper and the metals. You have less room in there because this material is going to be thicker. So passive pressure is probably your best bet. And with something that grips. A lot of people insist on using ulna bones. They're okay, but see, it'll get in there. It just does not grip as well at the bottom of the notch as a piece of antler. And you want it to grip so you can, put on some good force, pop out that flake, and it takes its toll on the notcher. But it can be worth it for a nice little notch. All right, let's see. Turn it over, do it again. Passive pressure. You can see the tool size right here. See where I pushed in the middle? You can see the width of the tool matches the pop out. You can see that on artifacts too sometimes. If you want to really get accurate, you get an artifact and copy the tool size. All right, it's a little bit too deep now for this particular notcher. I don't have any room left. And I think everyone knows what passive pressure is. For the new people, passive pressure is just pushing and pushing until the flake releases by itself. It'll surprise you, right? In a way, it kind of is a surprise when it happens. If you really knew, it's a surprise you actually created a flake. But that's not what I'm talking about. Passive pressure, just push until the flake releases by itself. You're not forcing the issue with an intense ramping up of pressure. Just slow ramping up of pressure. Or even steady pressure with just a slight increase toward the end. As long as it's not aggressive. Passive means slightly different things to different people. I try to ramp up slowly and watch the sides so I'm not near the sides, and then wait for that flake to release. Sometimes it doesn't always work. If you're too thick at the bottom and you're stalling, like right there where what I'm doing, you have to widen it out a little bit and hope you can press off a flake. When I grind, it gets wider, right? So I'm already having to make a wider notch here on this side because the tool is getting wider as I grind and dress the front of the notcher. So in an ideal situation, you have a notching tool, one notching tool for each side. if you're doing the very delicate, very narrow notches, the best thing to do is have a tool for each side so that you don't have to go back and thin down the main portion of the flaker before proceeding to the next notch, unless you don't mind asymmetry with one notch wider than the other, as they do have in the archaeological record. You want to keep both of them the same without losing too much time. One notcher for each side, that way you don't have to redress. Okay, so I stalled it already because the thickness isn't quite thin enough on this side, so I'll use the metal one to continue because it's more narrow and I can push more pressure into that stall and get a flake to release, in theory. Yeah, so nice little pop out. You can see the impression of the tool again right there. Nice pop out. I could go back to the antler and pretend I didn't cheat just then. Get rid of the very thin edge and then try to pop one out on the other side. Again, I'm risking it because it's a little bit too narrow for this particular flaker, but I'm going to try it anyway. Not too bad. And you can pop off an ear or a bar just by trying to flatten out the bottom of that notch, so I got to be careful with that too. All kind of passive pressure there. All right. So hopefully I didn't forget any major pieces of advice there. The thing to keep in mind with natural materials is it's going to be thicker than metal. So for the same, okay, how do I say this? You'll get used to how thick you'll need the metal to be, you know, the thickness here on your metal tools to knap a certain thickness of flint or whatever. So for the same thickness of flint, you're going to have a thicker natural material than you will with the metal. So that means you have to thin down your preform proportionately more thin to accommodate the natural material. Okay, it has to be thin if you want narrow notches with natural tools. Okay. Yeah, I don't want to do the vertical notcher right now. Usually I can get sufficient depth without going to a vertical arrangement. Just crunch in the notches with a narrow tool. Usually that's sufficient for what I do. I'm going to have to get fancy because there are people that want to know I want to see a fancier, more advanced techniques on video, so I'm going to have to do it I'm going to have to do more vertical notch work. So right now this is horizontal notch work, horizontal pressure. Yeah, pretty much stall that one. What do you do when you stall a notch? I found my diamond file. What you do is, if you stall a notch and you're using modern tools and you don't care about authenticity or learning how to do it the old way, you file an angle at the bottom of the notch, so it's not all rounded back inside there. You file a sharp angle and then press off on it. You can use either a round or this tri-face type arrangement, and sit there and just file it down. You can also use a square, I suppose, and get in there a narrow, let's see, spatula looking file, because they do have those too. They have the, let me see, they have the small version of the large file. They got a really tiny version of this, right, where the edge is square. Instead of having it pointy like this, this is a faceted file where it's got three sides. They got these as well, and you can use this at the bottom of the notch too and make it square automatically. With this is a little bit more difficult with this one because it is tapered. The other one that's straight, like the big one, is just going to be straight, and you can probably do it a lot easier. But you're going to hit the sides. Well, of course, if you don't care, it doesn't matter. So you sit there and you do this until you can see that you've created a good flatness. It's thin enough to push a flake off. Now, are you going to have metal marks and traces of your file at the bottom of that notch? Oh yes. You're going to have to hide that somehow with another pop out. But see, that angle is what's going to do it for you. And then you do the passive pressure flake on top of that. You rest your tool on top of that, or get a bite into the side of it. You can either rest your tool on top and slide it down over like that, or you can bite into it with the frontal surface of the tool and then push down. Either way, I tend to bite into the stone with my technique. Instead of dragging it down, I bite into it and then push down to pop out a flake. And then to hide your file marks, you take a final pop out on the other side. In theory, it works every time. So yeah, there's the file marks are gone. Dress up the bottom of the notch if you want, whatever. Okay, so hopefully that answers some questions. I'll try to upload this tonight. For you that never seen these before, these are diamond files. You can buy them in sets of 6 or 4, I can't remember. They come in different shapes. There's this trifacial, there's round, and there's rectangular cross sections. I think those are the 3 options. Okay, so yeah. Gotta be thin, that's the whole thing. If you can get your preforms thin enough, you can notch almost anything. But even if you have thick preforms, you can still do the notching with some preparation beforehand. Just, it's going to require more pressure, more strength, but you can notch. This is the same material, right? Both of these are the same material. You can notch thick or thin with natural or metals with the right preparation. If you still a notch with natural tools, you're not going to have the file to help you, of course. And what you do is you just have to widen out the notch. If you're using natural tools and you stall the notch, just just widen the notch out. That's what they used to do back in the day anyway. Sometimes they would, as a matter of procedure, they would widen out the notch as they went in anyway, in many cases. See, on this one I'm already stalling it. My preparation wasn't quite as good on this side, thinning it down. It's just slightly thicker. Even if it's slightly thicker, it can make a big difference. Yeah. It sounded like I was popping out a notch, but no, I'm pretty well stalled. Very easy to stall, especially on raw stone. I won't spend too much more time. I'm running out of time on this segment. Yeah, some real artifacts are that asymmetrical. They're usually not stalled though. One thing you'll notice on artifacts is they usually don't stall the bottom, or they have some method of avoiding the stall. But you do see it sometimes. Sometimes there's intentional grinding at the bottom of the notch too. That can be confused with stalling. Right now I'm just using a lot of pressure. But when I do this, I just can't seem to get the right position to do this with leg pressure. Yeah, this is slipping in my hand like this. It's slipping under my finger. When I use leg pressure, I can't grip it hard enough to prevent it from slipping under. If I modify the tool so that it's wider on the top and more narrow, I could probably do it. There is a copper pressure flaker in the archaeological record, believe it or not, that has a tapered handle just like that with a copper tip. But yeah, if I taper this, it won't slip. So that's on the list for things to make. I better quit while I'm ahead. I can blow off the barb easily with this much pressure. When I started this, when I was new, I could not pressure flake subtly enough to know what's just on this side of breakage. I would always exceed the breakage pressure and blow off the barb or ear or snap it across. You have to get used to the limits of the pressure you can use. Like if you're sitting here going, if I only could push more hard and get the leg pressure going and then really get in there and saying, okay, I know how much pressure I need to finish that notch. If that pressure is more than it can handle, you'll snap it across, you'll snap the ear or barb off. Yes, you'll have the right pressure to continue that notch, but you'll ruin the whole piece. You have to know when to back off. And sometimes you'll just have to say, okay, next. I'll just leave it asymmetrical and move on to the next one. In this case, the point is to that side. I can just take off some from this side and say, perfect alignment. Put the point here so it's in perfect alignment, so the notches don't look lopsided. Just take off this side here. Or I could leave it like that. You can still haft it like this. It's just going to be a little bit lopsided in the haft, but it doesn't make too much difference. Okay. That's it.